I would like to really thank Cinemazi's entire team for pulling off a one-day symposium like this to discuss all the things that we love about cinema and can't talk about collectively. So this has been a great day and experience and makes the work of academics, fans, collectors, music lovers into something legitimate. And so for that, thank you so much. To our panel today, we have had discussion on archiving in the morning and the importance of the archive for the future. Today's session, afternoon session is on online archiving or the archiving impulse. And we have three very passionate men who have been playing a very important role in the online world. So let me first introduce them and then I'll say a few things before we can begin. So Karan Bali is a graduate of the Film and Television Institute of India, FTII Pune, with specialization in film direction. Based in Mumbai, India, he has directed various films, mostly documentaries. But for our purposes, Karan is also the co-founder and content in charge of upperstall.com, which I have found very useful for my own work. It's a reputed website on the cinema of the Indian subcontinent. Besides Upperstall, he has written various articles on the history of Indian and Pakistani cinema for well-known print publications such as Hindustan Times and Time Out Mumbai, and online sites such as Scroll and The Wire. Our third on that side on the right, Param Arunachalam runs the website MySwar, an accurate and comprehensive repository of Hindi film music metadata. After working in the IT industry for more than a decade, he combined his expertise in executing large technology programs with his passion for music and data to start MySwar in 2011. The MySwar database stores information about every Hindi film released since 1931 and captures detailed metadata of Hindi film songs, including credits and music attributes. And Vaibhav Munjal, who you've already heard in the morning, is the co-founder of Chalchitra Talks, a platform where he recommends movies, books, music, and everything that makes for good pop culture. He has also directed multiple short films, ads, and sketches over the years and is releasing his first feature-length project soon. He has an original podcast series called The Longest Interview, where he has interviewed some of the most influential artists in the entertainment industry. Okay, so we spent the time in the morning discussing the archive and why it's important for future generations to have authentic information, or at least information that has been cross-checked and has some value in terms of how academics or fans or journalists and critics can access material about Indian cinema's past. And yet, when we talk about the online world today, we have to recognize, and I want to quote Lawrence Liang, who was going to be here, but he's not here today, unfortunately, but he had once said that we have moved from the fortress model of the archive, which was based in a physical institution, a geographically located institution, to a very different kind of viral location. So when we talk today about the archive, we are actually talking also about the archive effect. We recognize something has archival value when it turns into an event in the online world. And information that we did not have access to suddenly erupts and emerges, and there's a discussion online about that kind of material. So it's a very important source because the readers of history, as a scholar like Jamie Barron once said, the readers of history have turned into users of history. They are making their own archives. And what we have here today are three people who have actually created their own kinds of archives on screen based on material that they are constantly gathering, and it's a kind of continuous process. So I would like us to think about this archival impulse specifically in the technological context of an online world today. And also remember that we have accidental archives and we have archives that have nothing of a huge number of people who are involved in the film industry. And I say this because we must remember that there is a hyper-visible world of the film industry and of cinema, and there is a very invisible world that doesn't get archived even by reputed um, archives or even collectors, because our relationship to cinema is based on what is visible immediately to us. So I hope we can have some conversation about that as well. But to begin with, we'll go like this. Maybe we could start, Karan, by giving us a sense specifically about what made you get into upperstall.com and what are the sort of difficulties you faced, and how did you go about dealing with those challenges?
First, I'm really glad that we're having a platform here to speak about these issues. And again, I do want to thank the Cinemazi group. I was not sure I would be free, and they were really persistent in the fact that they wanted me to come. And I'm glad I was able to work my schedule out. Regarding upperstall.com, I think to be honest, I did not want to start it. Just a little backdrop here. I'm a little bit of what you would call a retro kid. That what I got down from my parents, that even my dad, though he was in his teens in the 1950s, he picked up 78 RPM records of K.L. Sehgal and Pahadi Sanyal. The films I was introduced to were the films of George Cukor and Alfred Hitchcock, the classic era of Hollywood. My mother introduced me to classic Indian cinema, Guide, Gurudutt. So I actually grew up on that diet rather than actually films of the 1970s. So maybe think somewhere that made me a person where the historical aspect of cinema was always extremely fascinating, because I think history somewhere fascinates me. Upperstall was more born that when I was looking for more and more material to increase my knowledge of Indian cinema, history of Indian cinema, and of course I was more restricted that English was the language in which I was looking for things, I found very difficult. So then one decided, okay, there seems to be a vacuum here. Is there something we can do about it? Because what did we have in our time? I think our Bible was Indian film by Eric Barno and S. Krishnaswamy. You had Firdaus Rangunwala's books. You had So Many Cinemas by V.D. Garga. And really, there was very little thing beyond that. And the few publications I'd managed to preserve from NFDC and Cinema India International, Cinema Vision India. That really then was the basis of things starting Upperstall. In a way, I think that helped, because those magazines and all that, they came at a time when the people involved with the earlier age were still alive. So I think it was though one had to do a lot of fact checking, it was a little easier then, because a lot of it was from the horse's mouth even alive. Unlike today, where we've lost generations, and it's becoming more and more difficult to fact check. So initially, as I said, it was born more of a vacuum. And I think Iraji said, Yassi said that what he felt was a tremendous sense of loss. That is also kind of a similar feeling. I felt there's so much not there. So the first thing was to address that. And actually, when we began Upperstall, the contemporary part was very different. The whole point was to actually have sections on luminaries of Indian cinema and the classic films of Indian cinema, all languages, not just. So that was our focus initially, to fill up those gaps. But the point was to actually first at least get the classic films ki write-ups on them, and to have write-ups on the luminaries of Indian cinema who deserve to get their due. And really that's where we kind of took off from. But also the difficult part then was also getting the material, because in 2000, and we've been going on for 25 years in our own way, it was really, really tough, and a lot of people didn't trust us to give us their material. When I go to BR Films to get booklets of Naya Daur or Gumrah, I had to assure them I will come back and return it. Which of course I did. I know what it means to them. When I went to Joy Bimal Roy to get the lobby cards of Sujata and Bandini, I really had to work on them to get that material, have it scanned, and we had to send it back. Slowly, of course, along with the write-ups, I built a very small archive of my own, but that was very, very thing specific because one, there was a lack of space, especially in a city like Bombay. So what thing fascinated me were the song booklets. They were, you were able to keep them because they were finite in size, but I think more importantly, they gave the maximum information I needed at that point of time. That not merely, I just said what is visible, the main people. It gave me the whole cast and crew. It gave me the synopsis of the film. If a film is lost forever, that's the only idea you have of what that film might have spoken about. And of course, the songs that the words were over there. But I found that actually the most thing useful to put together. And it was through that maybe even if I don't have write-ups, but at least I got knowledge of certain cinematographers, art directors, the kind of work they've done across so many movies. And they don't have a line on them. So it began with that, and then it evolved in its own way. I also think maybe we could have done a lot more, but the fact is that I'm a filmmaker first. As and when I'm actually involved with my films, obviously Upper Stall takes a slightly, backseat. A lot of people have started after us whose main resources were, to build up that history, and obviously they've done much more. But I think we were also able to do what we had to, that we could keep our priorities. And the fact that, like again, I think Ashaji mentioned, that even in that internet boom, money was not the criteria that we have to make money out of. And that is why we had no pressure on what we had to do with the website. We could kind of do it. So that's how the journey began.
So in the morning session, I briefly told about like the things which which brought the existence of Chalchitra Talks. I'll give you some more examples to how the things we have done. So currently across platforms, we are on 1 million subscribers, including YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, if you include everything. But like every follower that we have gotten over the years is a hard-earned follower. Like I'll give you an example. Since I told in the morning session that I did this for discipline, but to get a new subscriber for a thing which is very niche, like when I talk about world cinema, the growth is never like exponential, and I always knew it. So back in 2019, I had some 9,900 subscribers, and we were about to cross 10,000 subscribers. So I threw a party where I called all my friends, hey, tonight we are going to cross 10,000 subscribers. And we had gotten a few guests, so we knew this will happen. But I had sent all the invites and I realized, okay, we are not getting the subscribers. We have gotten the cake and everything, but the people are not coming in. And then I realized by the evening that I did not have 10,000 subscribers for the 10,000 subscriber party. I was around 100 or 120 short. So what I did was, I'm like, okay, I used to live near Marol metro station, so I went downstairs and I approached strangers and I asked them, hey, will you subscribe to my YouTube channel? And this is a line which people don't get to hear a lot. Like when you approach them, people get stuck on, do you have a minute or everything? I am like, will you subscribe to my YouTube channel? And then I realized I was able to close one person every minute. So in around 2 hours, I had those 120 subscribers. I needed to cut my cake for the 10,000 subscriber party. And currently on Instagram, we have around 500K followers, and on YouTube, 365K followers. But most of these followers I have gotten through this only. Like people really underestimate you approaching people. People think कि हम एक video बनाएंगे, we'll make this viral video and people will come in. They won't. Particularly if your work is niche. Particularly if you are not playing the game of extremes where you are chasing like clickbaits and everything. So every person who follows Chalchitra is a hard-earned follower, and I've never taken them for granted. And this is something I also recommend people, like don't play the game of like 1 million subscribers. Like you should rather have 1,000 people who love you than 1 million people who kind of like you. And that is the game we have played over the years, and we continue to do it. We are now much more of a structured organization now. We have a lot of writers who like make these curated posts of recommendations. We have in-house editors. We have more creators on Chalchitra Talks like me, who have their expertise, like a guy who is an expert in Hindi literature. Then we have some more book recommendation like creators. I have a guy in my team, his name is Hindol. He's one of the biggest movie nerds I know. You can name him any film from the last 100 years, and he can tell you the year that film came in. We have tried this multiple times in our podcast. So I have like gotten people who are smarter than me, and I think that is always a prerequisite. And yeah, to build any company, you just need to hire people who are smarter than you. So that is something I am doing. And yeah, now, and we like that Spider-Man thing, with great power comes great responsibility. So I'm really, really taking care of the fact, okay, now we are at a level where people will get to know about the existence of certain movies through us. So if we say something which is not true, we are creating, let's say, quote unquote, fake news. So we are like very, very vigilant about that. Like we don't do that. And hence, I am so glad I came here, and I'm also getting to learn of all the things we need to take care of and all the things we can do in regard to archiving.
So I am from the era of Cool Goose that later became Cool Toad. Has anyone heard about Cool Goose? Yeah? No? Okay, so Cool Goose was a music piracy website. And I was in the US at that time, and I had no access to Hindi film music. And the only way I could get to my favorite Hindi film songs was by downloading them from the internet. And Cool Goose was a godsend. Only one problem with Cool Goose was that it had terrible metadata. So you could get the songs, but you would not know who composed that song, who were the lyricists, who sang them. And so it started as a personal project where I created a spreadsheet to tag the data for my personal collection. So I would download the songs from Cool Goose, find out who composed it, who wrote it, who sang it. I would make an entry in the Excel spreadsheet, and then I would actually edit the metadata of that MP3 file so that I could search it in my personal collection based on the artist. That spreadsheet, which started off with a few hundred entries, is the Mysore database currently, with about 76,000 Hindi film songs across 11,000 films from 1931 to present day. I started, the base for Mysore was obviously Harmandir Singh Hamraz's Hindi film Geet Kosh. I started for the period between 1931 to 1980. I got all the information from the Geet Kosh, and the information subsequent to that was built ground up from primary sources. Primary sources basically.
Yes.
You have time? Okay. So primary sources, I'm talking about things like the films themselves, the songs, the medium in which the songs are published, records, cassettes, CDs, and even the Geet Kosh information, I have tried to corroborate it with the primary sources. One of the things, so there are things like Hindi film, the song booklets and press books, but one thing I didn't hear people talking about is the opening credits and ending credits of films. In this day and age when you get a skip intro option at the beginning of the film, that is a vital source of information for films that is often overlooked. And I was just talking to Sandeep Awaji and this morning, people think of, when they think of O.P. Nayyar, they think of Aankhein, the 1950 film, as his debut film. And only recently we discovered that he was credited as the background music director for a 1949 film called Kaneez. And the only place I've seen this information is in the opening credits of Kaneez. So that is, one piece of information that hasn't been documented very well. And the issue is that a lot of those films of that era are not available anymore. And so it's always been a sort of uphill battle trying to gather, to get to the films, look at the opening credits and get information from them. The other thing that I would like to talk about is discogs.com. That's an amazing, amazing resource if you have not gone there. You will find scans of records and music CDs and cassettes on discogs.com. Suresh Shanvankar has done some fantastic work uploading his collection on Discogs as well as archive.org. So anyone who has all the record collectors here, I would encourage them to upload their collections, basically the record, the image of the record and the covers that came with it. That's a very precious resource for documentation.
So it's just to get back to all three of you again, because all the responses are quite different, and then yet there are overlapping issues. But I think this opening credits is a key issue, because the credits don't just include director, actors, music director. They include all the people who are involved, not just opening credits, even the end credits, which have disappeared from YouTube. You don't see the end credits. You can see the opening credits. And I just wanted to say that I could not have done the work that I'm doing on 60s Bombay cinema in color without YouTube, because I have accessed films that are not there in the archive. These are all available on YouTube, so it's been a very important resource. And yet in the online sites that all of you have created, which are so interesting, how can we widen this world that we think needs to be archived even for an online world? Because we've already seen the mistakes of the past, that they didn't go and record the work of art directors, they didn't document the work of cinematographers even, some only a few. So we've seen those mistakes that official archives have made in the past. How can we change that today in our context when we have this whole world of practitioners?
See, I think it involves different aspects, not merely keeping someone working online. The immediate need of the hour is actually to find the people who are alive and do an oral history.
Exactly.
Before anything, before that dies out. I was fortunate enough to actually be part of an oral history with Tinkamini Kaushal. And really a lot of things that she spoke about. She spoke about finally in that oral history. So that, I think, is the first and, I think foremost, that we have to be able to find people from the past, get an oral history about what cinema was like at that time, of course, in relation to their work. Because unless we have direct inputs from the horse's mouth, the further we kind of go down, the further we are more distant from that history.
Exactly.
Over there. And there's just one little point I think I want to make. Maybe it's the filmmaker in me. You mentioned YouTube, how it gave you a whole access to a lot of films. Yes, YouTube is a wonderful resource. But I have a major problem with that when we archive something, we have to archive it as true to its nature of creation. Artists have put together that work. The biggest problem with YouTube, and especially with channels like Shemaru, etc., is that the films with an aspect ratio of 4:3 have been cut to 16:9, and it's not like it's stretched that you can de-stretch it. They've actually cut frames from the top and the bottom. To me, this is the biggest slap you can give to the filmmaker and his team and what they have constructed. They have worked to compose in that frame, to balance elements in that frame. And similarly on that line, I'm a total, let's just say that I don't believe in colorization of films at all. Because again, the team worked to get tones of black, white, and gray. That's what they kind of work for. So when we archive, if we're giving information, why are we deviating from actually the aesthetics of the artist? This I find is a major thing over there. So one thing I feel is the oral history is a must, because before they are the direct link. Like I said, I was lucky earlier that those magazines that I was able to refer to, or books, still had interviews with people who were alive. So that is one thing, because I think otherwise we're going things further and further from history. We're going more on hearsay. And also sometimes when we, this is a small also that, for example, when we do oral history or we find out some points, then history also gets corrected in Think Cinema if we've left out some. Just one small example from outside. When we do early cinema history, all that we learned, nobody mentioned Alice Guy Blaché. And now we find out she was one of the greatest pioneers from the 1895, who had her own film studio also later on in America in 1913. And she just hasn't been acknowledged. Film history is very different now when you know of Alice Guy Blaché. Or like I think Martin Scorsese said that when the normal historians often declared that when the talkies came, the camera stopped moving. But if you look at A Personal Journey through American movies by Martin Scorsese, they say more and more movies have been discovered where directors were not shackled with the camera having to be in a blimp or a thing. Now that changes our aspect of history. And I feel that the oral history with the people involved is very, very important. Apart from that, what I think Param said when I mentioned the song booklets, obviously I mentioned it for films not available, but the opening credits are a must opening and end. The credits put together, especially the role of those who worked so hard behind the scenes.
So, in my podcast over the last 3 years, I have a singular question that I start with all my guests, which is, what is your first movie watching memory? And I believe when people talk about the things they are passionate about, they speak poetry. So, you need to see, like when people say, "Ki the year was 1980s," like I had gone to see this, like my movie watching memories of the year 2000 when I watched Fir Bhi Dil Hai Hindustani for the first time in theater. So everyone gets very passionate when you make them recall like the stuff from the past. And I also have a regret in my life that I should have talked to my grandparents more about the things that I could have learned from them. Because I don't think people in our generation or in the newer generations are doing that. Because even your grandparents will speak poetry when you ask them कि दादी क्या हुआ था तब, like partition के time पे क्या हुआ था. There is a switch in the eye and they just like to keep talking about those things again and again, and nothing is fabricated. They are actually enjoying like talking about those things. So I really like the point, like we need to go back to all the sources of oral, like people who can give us the oral history. That is something I am in agreement with. Yeah.
So I have a bit of a tunnel vision when it comes to films. I only focus on music. So
But even in music, there's
no,
the
absolutely,
orchestra.
absolutely. I was going to come to that. So I can't speak to the art directors and so on and so forth. But I think the problem with music has been also directly at the source. Up until 1950, you would only see credits for music director and lyricist. You would not see singers being credited. You would not see song recordists or their music assistants being credited. 1950 to 1980s, I would say, it improved a little bit. You would see, other than the usual suspects, you would see music arrangers, music assistants, song recordists. And I think the turning point came a little bit later when A.R. Rahman came on scene. And he was very generous with his credits. He started this whole thing of recognizing a lot of his team members. So you would see, for the first time, we started seeing things like mixed and mastered by. I mean, I still don't fully understand what that means, but I see credits like that. And he would credit instrumentalists. And so like I said, part of it is we can only document what's available in the source. And that, I think, that's a bit of film history or film music history that is lost. There's some fantastic research done where people have figured out that, like, there is this group called Swaralap based out of Pune. They have interviewed musicians of that era, and they have figured out who played the flute in this song, who played the sitar in this song, and they have done a wonderful job of documentation. But that is all, again, word of mouth. It is not from the source. So if the information is available, we document it. So that, again, as far as music is concerned. And just a little bit of a deviation. So it is not that the filmmakers didn't understand the importance of this larger team. So there's this period in 1973 when there were like suddenly a flurry of films that credited instrumentalists and arrangers and things like that. And that practice has, just dropped off the radar after that. And I was wondering, why is this anomaly there? And this is my guess that there was this 4-month strike in late 73, early 1974, where the Cine Musicians Association, I think it was called, that went on strike. And I think basically it was a compromise from filmmakers. मैं तुमको credit देता हूँ, आप strike पे मत जाओ. And so there's this period. So they knew that it was important, but for some reason they didn't think it was important for people to know about it. So that has thankfully changed. And right now, the credits, if you look at the end credits and the opening credits, it's just copious amount of credits. You just have to figure out what you want. And for me, that has been music, so I've been documenting that.
No, because I've spent so much time on YouTube in the recent past, last few years. There are names: Meenu Katrak, Mangesh Desai, assistants, hairstylists, costume designers and assistants, etc. You suddenly get a whole different system of production. And those details, like, I know Karan is saying that you have to get it from the horse's mouth. But what if the horse is dead? Then you have to get it from those who were connected to the horse. And you have to get it from the children, you have to get it from people who work with them. And that's the only way in which we can still make an attempt to capture what existed. But we have a future in which hopefully these mistakes will be looked at. We at least teach our students that you must deal with material so that you can actually expand the notion of the archive. And I would like to keep at least 15 minutes for us to have a conversation. So I think we can open it up now for questions from the audience.
It's been a very interesting session, and of course, like Ranjani said, we've used all of your websites as resources at some point or the other. But one of the questions that I'd like to ask you is that as people who started these websites, to sustain them and to keep them going is a challenge. And I say this because I was working with this website, Cinestan.com, for many years, which shut down simply because, we couldn't find the resources to keep it going. And, the discussion that we had in the previous session was that it's important, what Sumanji said, it's important to continue to do what you're doing. And Cinemazi is one website in this space as well. Because once a website shuts down, Cineplot shut down, for example, and that whole wealth of information, material, discussions, everything went away in one shot. I know somebody who's actually archived that website. So if whenever I need to look for information, thankfully I have that connect, but it's not accessible to the rest of us. So, some of those challenges perhaps you could talk about.
Obviously, the biggest challenge is, or one of the biggest challenges is to be financially viable. I don't have as deep pockets as the Batras, but so, it is obviously, I run Mysore out of, with my money, and the attempt has been to recoup some of the cost through various means. So, I have a couple of streams of revenue, but it is barely, it's not enough. It is not enough to keep the website going. It's not enough to sustain it with the money that I get from the website. So one thing that I have done, which at least preserves the work I've done, is I've published a bunch of ebooks based on the data from Mysore. So even if the website shuts down, the beauty of a website is that it's living data, and all of us know that at any point in time, we don't have perfect data. We have data that is available to us at that point in time, and it keeps improving. People keep sending their corrections and giving me new information. So the ebooks are a snapshot of the information on the website. So that is, that doesn't ensure that the website will die at some point, but at least there is a snapshot of it available.
We are actually, me and my, I think, two partners, we put in our own resources and we think continue it. But like I said, because we never got into that whole financial pressure, in the beginning we had a very small thing set up. There are two other partners. One handles the thing technical aspect. The other is now actually gone become more busy. He's one of the most popular people on the OTT and thing creating shows. That's Karan Anshuman out there. But we run it in our own small way because we never had that pressure. Yes, so even those small Google ads helps me to pay the outside contributors a very token amount, but it helps me. And of course, what we write, we don't take anything for. But the fact that because it was never something that was, that we had that financial pressure from the beginning, we've been kind of able to, I may not review every film. I may not have I still, even when I talk about classic films and luminaries, there are things so many more I have to fill up on, especially cinema outside Hindi cinema. But yeah, slowly. There are times I don't get time when I'm actually making my films. But I think that's helped one to at least keep it going because there's been no pressure.
So I also have a quick point on this. I think people don't talk enough about backups, and like you should always have a backup of a backup of a backup of a backup. I like even when I am shooting anything, I don't sleep well until my backup is in 3 different cities and on cloud. I pay for 2 TB storage on Google and on Apple. I just, and that is why I've been able to preserve so much data since the last 15 years that people wouldn't have otherwise. And also recommend people to use multiple social media apps because I have experienced what happens when an app shuts down. We had 350K followers on TikTok. We used to make recommendation videos there, and TikTok shut down. The whole world, India was making fun of it. Oh, we are so glad, such a bad. But I got that so emotional that these people will cry the day Instagram or YouTube shuts down. So, because there is a little, I think, classist behavior to it. Okay, TikTok is bad, Instagram is good, YouTube is better. But my recommendation would be to have the backups on every possible platform. Have like otherwise like invest a lot in SSDs, HDDs, servers. Like people can call you a madman, and it's okay when it comes to backup because I think that's the way to go about it.
I totally agree with the backup thing because that's also what my technical team does so that you don't lose it. But I think it's also the filmmaker part in us that we make sure we don't lose our rushes and we have them in multiple spaces.
Other questions? Yes.
I will start with the like mention of as you were saying assistant director का नाम नहीं होता है या so when I heard this record of OC Bisa Happy Children even then it was referring to the tea supply which was done by the person it is referring in that record. Second thing you were telling about authentication of information we get. Vishwas Narulkar you must be aware of. He goes to the office of HME, he checks the handwritten records also and metric records also. Then he's doing a lot of corrections in this matter also. दूसरा एक छोटी सी बात आपको बताना चाहता हूँ सबको कि there is on YouTube channel there is a big channel by Tommy Dan 55 and he has done a great job.
Yeah, absolutely.
His movies are complete, no cuts, no logos and wonderful print. And third thing I want to tell you कि earlier, what used to happen when this Open Air Saab has created a musicians association and their fee was fixed. Before that, अगर movie hit होती है तो पैसा मिलेगा नहीं तो नहीं मिलेगा. So they got strength also that way. तो Open Air साहब ने बहुत बड़ा काम किया और उसके बाद जावेद अख्तर ने he has built a writers guild also. तो यही 2-3 बातें मेरे को बोलनी थी. जो काफी इंपॉर्टेंट लगी मेरे को यहाँ पे बोलने में. Thank you.
HMV के बारे में कुछ बोलूं मैं? Ranjini, can I talk about
Yes,
HMV?
yes,
Yeah,
sure.
so HMV is the largest custodian of Hindi film music. I think my guesstimate is about 40% of Hindi film music is owned by them. And the gentleman who's talking about it, I'm afraid they are not doing as good a job as they should be. They need to really, really step up because at this point I know that there are a tons of errors in their metadata. One example is Nashad, the screen name for Shaukat Delvi. He doesn't exist in Saregama's catalog. All his music is credited to Naushad. There are a couple of films by the same name, Unche Log. One was released in 1965, one was released in 1985. The 1965, which is the Feroz Khan film, has Rajesh Khanna and Salma Agha on its album art. So they are, I mean, we have tried petitioning them, telling them that they need to fix this, but I love Saregama. I mean, they have given us some of the best music ever, but I think they need to step up.
Yes.
Now this is regarding Param's thing, point. I was attending a 100th anniversary celebration of Dev Saab in Jaipur. So I was invited by a person जहाँ पे नज़दीक में था. So there, they had made a small poster like this पीछे. So I was just so मैंने कहा, I said one to Sarana ji. So then immediately I realized दो पिक्चरें हम दोनों देव साहब की पिक्चर के अंदर ऋषि कपूर और राजेश खन्ना they had mentioned. अरे उसका पोस्टर था. मैं सुन के हैरान हो गया. मैंने कहा ये तो बड़ी गलती हो गई. तो फिर एक और थी हमराज. I think हमराज कौन सी? There were two films.
Amraz, B.R. Chopra.
नहीं B.R. चोपड़ा की तो थी लेकिन उसके अंदर why was he putting in the Devdas thing, in the Devanand thing? तो immediately I said, मैंने कहा एक आदमी को बुलाया. मैं कहा ये किसने बनाया? कहता है वो जो बच्चे उन लोगों ने वो he pointed out to a few girls from the college. वो मैं कहा इनको बोलो ये गलत है. वो कह रहा है सर छोड़ो ना ये आपको मालूम है ना बाकी लोगों को थोड़ी मालूम. अरे यार मैंने कहा छोड़ो ना ये कोई बात थोड़ी होती है. You can't put up a poster like this featuring हम दोनों in Dev Saab's 100th birth anniversary celebration featuring Rajesh Khanna and Rishi Kapoor. Anyway, that was the
This
thing
is
which I thought.
actually it's a major problem now.
That's a major problem. You are very right, Karan.
This is the biggest problem that has happened that now with think social media, YouTube and everything, so many channels and have things sprung up and people just don't confirm the facts. There are times I've also made mistakes. Just think recently, though I thought I corrected that mistake, Bobby Singh pointed out to me about the two Asit Sens. The first thing I did was correct it, then I informed the person, thank you for actually bringing that point up. So now as more and more people are using their channels, it's getting more and more dangerous because more and more disinformation is actually going out.
Yeah.
This is again something that really has to be kind of looked into. No, that way there are, I mean, one can find millions of instances like this, but it's even when AI comes, it's the biggest danger as to what AI has been fed.
One last question we have time for.
I'm not having a question, but I'm adding to what Karanji said about the editing and the format of the original format of the films. So I have been working with the home video companies since 2000. So the culprits of this editing are actually the home video companies. So the transition occurred when we started making VHS cassettes. So they had a limitation of 3 hours. The first editing occurred there when the film was more than 3 hours. Second editing occurred when the VHS was converted into VCDs. VCDs again had the duration of 1 hour. So the 2 VCD film became of 2 hours. So every film which had 2.20 hours duration became 2 hours. So editing happened there. I am the culprit of that too. I was at the editing machine then. We used to edit out songs. We used to edit out sequences to fit in that film into 2-hour format. So we are the culprits. Then the VCD converted into DVD, but nobody cared to take the duration back to 230. That 2-hour duration only went to DVDs. And DVDs came with 3-in-1, 4-in-1, 5-in-1 format. Then again the compression was there. And that DVD, VCD again came to YouTube. So that is the reason you find YouTube many films of only 2 hours. So that editing is there and that is lost forever. unless the home video companies go back to their masters and again take that 2:30 or 3 hours film back to the YouTube. Unless that happens, you will have the edited form only.
I think we have run out of time now, and thank you so much to all three of you. One thing, hopefully, we've put on the agenda. Paper documents are important, films are important, but so is speech, especially for of those people who have not been documented at all. And so we need to make that into a very major part of the agenda, something that came up in Ira's presentation also, that Ghatak's archives are roaming around like this. And that, you know, interviews do matter. And in my project, I know for a fact that most important material has come through my interviews with people, family members and assistants and all who worked with the original practitioners. So this is also to Cinemazi, that oral history is important, and I hope that will also become, Asha, I'm talking to you. Setting our own desires before you, because we know that you will play a very important role, hopefully in the future, to ensure that this documentation really is more democratic than it has been in the 20th century. Thank you.